For many small liberal arts colleges, these are tough times. In Kansas City, take William Jewell, for example. For several years, that college has been losing money. It has cut programs and reduced faculty, but it is still running in the red. Fortunately, here in Springfield, Drury University is bucking the trend. There is a renewed sense of excitement since Jeff Frederick became the new president last year. Drury's enrollment has increased, and it has added new majors, and tuition costs seem to be holding the line. Dr. Frederick took time out of his busy schedule today to talk about what has happened at Drury over the past year and his plans for the future. Dr. Frederick, welcome to In Our Town.
Good to see you, Tom. Good to be here. We have shared a couple of beverages and told a couple of jokes and gotten to know each other. You were one of the first people that I reached out to after hitting the shores of Springfield, because I knew you had been an institution here for a long time, and I could learn a lot from you.
Oh, you're so kind. I'm not sure that's deserved, but I'll take it, man. You know, my age, that doesn't come around that often.
Yes.
So, tell our listeners a little bit about what you were doing before you came to Springfield.
Sure. Well, my undergraduate degree was in business, and so I worked in business for 8 years, and then came home one day and told my wife I wanted to go back to grad school, but to study history, something I hadn't studied as an undergrad. And to her great credit, she did not say, "Who are you and what have you done with my husband?"
That's Melinda, right?
Melinda, that's right.
Uh-huh.
So I quit my career in healthcare, went back and got a master's in history, and then went to Auburn University to get a PhD to study the history of the South, which I thought was... I thought there was some teaching and some writing that was a gift that I hadn't really been using, and that I think led me to this sense of vocational change.
And as I recall, you were specifically interested in mid-1900s.
Yeah, kind of the period after World War II and up through the Civil Rights Movement into about 1980. So finished the PhD, took a faculty job at the University of North Carolina at Pembroke, was there for 17 years. My time there ended with being a chair and a dean, and I left there to become the provost at Wingate University in Charlotte, North Carolina.
You know, our city manager, previous city manager, Tom Finney, was a deputy city manager at Charlotte. I'm sure you guys have got some Charlotte stories.
Well, you know, part of the reason why I thought I could make sense of Springfield is, you know, Charlotte's proximity to the Appalachians, and Springfield and the Ozarks, and, you know, there's a lot of cultural similarities in many ways between...
The Scots-Irish just kind of went straight west.
It's a true story. And I think in some sense then, I have seen Springfield as sort of the northernmost part of the South, where it meets the southernmost part of the Midwest. So our move here to become president at Drury was predicated on the sense that Drury does a lot of the things that are very important to liberal arts universities, like where I came from at Wingate, and then the culture and the ability to get to know people and to find partners, I was certain was going to be similar in Springfield to what it was in the Charlotte area.
So you just dropped right into the duck pond without much adjustment, sounds like.
Well, I have tried to be a good listener first and a good observer of all things Springfield and certainly all things Drury, but it's a good people town. You know, people care about each other, they're willing to work together, they want to collaborate, and I think they've been hungry for Drury to get back at the table in Springfield. And for whatever reason, we may have drifted apart from our seat for a little while, but I found that the town and the Ozarks and the region is very hungry for Drury to get back to having a little bit more of a prominent role, partnering on internships and on community problems and helping to make sure our faculty and our students are thoroughly integrated into the community. And so it's been a blessing to be here because it's similar to what I've been experiencing, and the people are just so good.
Well, I'm a long-time observer of what's going on here, and I think that you're up there at the top in terms of getting out in the community as compared to some Drury, not just Drury, but college presidents that we've had in the past. And, if you don't if you're not comfortable collaborating, this may not be the best place for you.
Man, I think that's true, but I think it's so important in the higher ed industry right now. Life is truly interdisciplinary, and you cannot live in one narrow lane your whole life. Whatever it is that you do, you're going to be depending on customers or students or partners or suppliers or collaborators of one sort. So we want to model this behavior everywhere. We also see the pace of technology changing, really at a faster and faster pace. And people can't walk out of their college experience knowing everything they're going to need to know for the next 50 years. There may have been a time where we thought that was true. So, we want to teach people how to learn, and part of teaching people how to learn is teaching them how to partner.
So I was thinking, as I was preparing for the interview today, maybe in terms of an overarching structure, to talk about where liberal arts colleges have been in the past, the challenges that they're facing, and how the ones that are going to succeed are going to adapt to the future. So let's start with the past. What's changed over the last several years that's made it difficult for a lot of these private colleges to succeed?
I think there's some external factors and probably some internal things that universities were slow to do. Externally, the birth rate has dropped significantly in the last couple of decades, and there's a slower than ever sense that communities will grow naturally by natural increase. Part of that just simply means less people across the country graduating high school. So there's a smaller pool of potential people going to colleges. So the pandemic sort of stopped some of that as well in terms of a few years of arrested development. And it's also true that there are more cultural criticisms of a university experience now than there have been for a long time. For centuries, really, people grew up thinking the best thing I can do for my kids is to really get them ready for a dynamic college experience, and then they'll write their own ticket. That tracked along with Americans' social mobility throughout the 20th century and into the 21st. But now there are some people who are arguing that a college education doesn't do much for you either personally or professionally. And we've been sort of slow in higher education to stop and say, well, let's pull that apart and see if that argument against our core mission really holds water. I would argue that it doesn't for a lot of reasons. I've spoken about this a fair amount and written about this some. I think the value of what a college education does is it's not supposed to prepare you for only your first job. It's supposed to give you a set of skills that allow you to adapt and evolve and grow. There's all sorts of metrics about financial gain of college graduates versus non. There's also a lot of information about those with college educations tend to live longer. They tend to be more likely to own homes. They tend to be more likely to identify difficult health situations earlier in their lives. They just lead lives where some of the challenges of not having that college education present themselves. So we've done not a very good job of making the argument about the value of it, and we've not internally changed as quickly as we could. To your point about liberal arts universities, the predicate here is that you need a range of skills and experiences, maybe even international travel, maybe a lot of internships, maybe some project or problem-based learning in order really to take advantage of the liberal arts experience. And a lot of institutions have been sort of slow to change, and I think pretty accurately for much of the 20th century, higher ed earned its reputation of being sort of stuck in its own way.
Let me get you to pause for a second. This is, as a student of history, I think you would agree that our country is more divided now than at least any time in the recent future politically. In fact, even the word liberal brings a lot of connotations with it. There's been claims, particularly from conservative people, that the universities and colleges are too woke. And I'm wondering to what extent that, if at all, might prevent people, or it might affect your enrollment, I guess what I would say. Is that a crazy question?
I think Drury has always said, whoever walks in our door, we're going to serve them. We're going to do everything we can to make them successful. It doesn't matter who they are, where they came from. Are they a U.S. veteran? Are they someone with a disability? Are they a person of color? Are they a person of a different nationality? So our model has always been, whoever walks in the door, we're going to do everything we can, because our mission is personalized education, to find them, to meet them where they are, and to help them along their way.
Well, how would you respond to this provocative comment that, higher education's really into diversity in everything except thought. It's just all liberal.
Well, let me pull that apart in two different ways. I think, the United States and much of the world has become increasingly multicultural. I mean, if we look at the census records, the number of people who are of multiple races is continuing to grow by percentage. The world has become more global, not just because of the tools, not just because we need a physical highway to get from doing commerce in one city to another. We have an information highway, and so the connection's everywhere. So there's a great value in exposing yourself to other cultures. Those are going to be who some of your suppliers are, or your students are, or your customers are.
The world doesn't look like Springfield, Missouri.
The world doesn't look like it looked anywhere in this country 50 years ago.
Yeah.
And to imagine a world where that doesn't exist, where the world is going to look like it did in the 50s or the 60s or the 40s for that matter, is to stand at the ocean and tell the wave not to come crashing the shore. Mm-hmm. The world is changing. People can choose to wish it hadn't changed, or that it would change even slower, but it is changing in front of our very eyes. In the same way people could say, I wish there wasn't email or cell phones. In the same way people could say, I wish there weren't CAT scans in hospitals. In the same way people could say, I wish there weren't arthroscopic surgery or artificial intelligence. It's here.
Yeah.
We should live in a world where we're allowed to flourish.
It seems to me, perhaps you would respond to this, that on the global level, there are macro trade trends, macro technological trends, and the notion that governments can really control all that is erroneous. What do you think?
Well, we're getting a little far afield of my expertise.
Okay,
but I'll say
I don't
that,
get to talk to a smart guy like you that who thinks about things, so I apologize.
I'll engage a little bit. I will say this: as a business major, as a capitalist, as a person who believes in free trade, I think ideas should be shared. I think products should be shared. I think we do better when we look at each other from the perspective of we should partner. It's the same philosophy that I've tried to bring to the university, is finding more partners and finding more people where we can share common ground together makes us all better. I don't have the only good ideas. So if I didn't listen to my team, to our students, to the context of higher ed, I'd be missing a whole world that's changing in front of my eyes by saying that I somehow know everything that needs to be known to run a university. In the same way, institutions, nations who engage regularly around the world find common solutions to common problems. It's possible that institutions, that universities, that corporations can function in a way in which they don't need partners. But I see that as increasingly unlikely in all of our futures. We're going to depend on each other.
One comment I've heard attributed to you is, maybe I think that you may want to expand on that further, is partner or perish.
Yeah, I think that's a common, phrase in higher ed that's been around for 20 years. If you're not partnering with industry, you don't know what they need and how do you influence your curriculum. If you're not partnering with public education as you train teachers, you're training, the next generation of teachers who don't really understand the individual context in the public schools, which have changed significantly in the last half decade for a lot of reasons. If you're not partnering with other universities to think about what their good ideas are and how you might apply them, you're in trouble. Our new master of health administration degree, where we partner with both Mercy and Cox, is a pretty good example of this. We need both of those health systems in this town, and our students are going to depend on them, and our employees get care from both of them. And to have experts from those two different organizations come together to help us write a practical curriculum to train health leaders for a rapidly changing future, that's a good example of partnering right there. And institutions that don't, who say, well, the way we did it 20 and 30 and 40 years ago, they're the ones that are in real trouble because their prospects are limited.
You know, I've never met a great leader that didn't give a lot of credit to the people with whom he works. Still, the last year since you got here, your enrollment's improved. You've started lots of initiatives. What's different about Drury than some other liberal arts colleges that are struggling?
Well, we just have a great team full of good thinkers, people who believe in partnering, people who believe in serving our students, and are willing to look at what we need to do a little bit different in order to continue to serve our students. We bother to listen to our students, which I think is a pretty important thing to do. I taught a class this week just to be back in a classroom for an hour and 15 minutes in order to engage some students on the principles of values-based leadership. It's not in my core discipline. It's not fields that I rapidly publish in, but it's the kind of thing as a practitioner to bring that to our students. Makes a lot of sense. I will say this: Drury is not immune, nor are any regional public universities immune to all of these same pressures. All of what our expenses are increasing. Not just inflationary expenses that we all pay as consumers, but the price of software is going up, the price of utilities in many areas are going up. We have some gorgeous, spectacular 19th century buildings, but you can imagine how difficult it is to keep them online. So we're not immune to any of these pressures. All we're trying to say is that there's a value in what we're doing. And some of our great partners, former graduates, trustees, alums, donors, corporations have helped us to navigate some of these difficult times. They have believed in our value of doubling down with an investment in Springfield. Right now that is paying off in more students, and we're very grateful for it. I think a lot of people wandered around Springfield and the Ozarks for a long time thinking, well, I hear a lot of good things about Drury. It's a great school, but I could never afford to go there.
Yeah, well, let's go there. So let's play act here. I'm a parent, and my daughter's considering Drury, but she has other options. What's your pitch?
I think the pitch is simple. When you believe in personalized education, you believe that every person really is a name and not a number. So you'll be in a class of 20 people, sometimes less, sometimes a little bit more. You won't be taught by a grad student. You won't be taught by someone who rarely is on our campus. You'll be taught by a faculty who we hire first to teach you, to expose you to ideas, not to teach you what to think, but to teach you how to think. You're going to be immersed from one end of campus to the other in knowing everybody, in student organizations. You can be a part of an athletic environment that has national championships hanging from our rafters. You can be part of an undergraduate research experience where you will be directly mentored to allow you to pursue some of the projects that you are passionate about. There is a personalized education experience that still believes in some of the old school values of learning how to look a person in the eye and shake a hand and be prepared for a meeting. And that all those things are possible at Drury, and that's our model. So if you come here, you're going to find your purpose. You're going to find your people that for the rest of your life you'll be having a cup of coffee in your dining room on a Saturday morning, and you'll be texting them. You'll be asking for career advice from beloved faculty members long after you walk across the stage. And you're going to get a bunch of skills. You're going to get a bunch of skills from the liberal arts environment. At Drury, every student gets a major, a minor, and a certificate. You get 3 credentials in the same 4 years, in the same number of hours it takes to graduate everywhere. And they don't all have to fit conventionally. You could be a major in our new engineering program, but get a minor in something else and a certificate in something completely else. Mm-hmm. You could be a student athlete who is a business major, but also sing in the choir.
I bet you 90% of people who were asked this question would answer it along these lines. Growing up, what teacher made the biggest impression on you? And most of the time, I would say it's going to be somebody while they were in grade school. They remembered what she did for him or her, a couple of stories, and then you go, you'll move into the college, higher education realm, and you remember one or two professors that you really connected with. And I mean, all the books you read, that's important, but to have somebody to challenge you that you can relate to, probe your thinking, and help you to learn how to think, that's invaluable.
It's life-changing. I mean, you'll walk out of a Drury experience with a series of mentors, and one of them might have been a residence advisor in the dorm room you stayed in, and one of them might be an athletic coach. 2 or 3 of them are going to be faculty members. Maybe it's the person who individually recruited you, or the registrar's office who said, yes, you can still graduate, we're going to figure this out, you don't need an extra semester. But that's the opportunity, and that is unique. And maybe not everybody needs that opportunity, but if you will benefit and flourish and thrive from that direct engagement, that personalized education, Drury exists for people, like you. And I think there are literally generations of alums that I've met in the last just under a year, all across the state, and frankly across the country, who have just told me their Drury story.
Right.
I was really struggling. I knew I was never going to get to law school, and this professor sat me down and worked through me. Or I never thought I would get through this chemistry class, but man, extra hours in the lab and a professor poured into me. It's not just that that's the kind of student we recruit. That's the kind of faculty member and staff member we recruit. Don't come here to teach our students if you want to just sort of show up and, lecture and go off. Be engaged with them. Be willing to be a mentor. Be willing to make sure that what you say in class might be equally designed to get someone to come to your office door and knock on it and say, Professor Carlson, could I ask you a question? Why, come on in. I would love to talk to you about it. Man, that's where the gold is in higher education, is those one-on-one relationships, that mentoring, that finding that faculty member, because that's going to last you forever.
So, what's on the horizon? Well, first off, I just want to make sure that it gets noted. You've got a fundraising campaign.
We do. And
tell us about that. I think you're ahead of the game on that.
We are. We created a campaign several years ago, long before I got here, called Fortify the Future. The goal was to raise $50 million. Our hope was to have it raised by 2027. We think we're going to have it raised this year by 2025, which is just a tremendous testimony to
Absolutely.
All the people who believe in what we do and why we do it, and we couldn't be more grateful. We will spend the next year, the 2025-2026 academic year, working on an institutional strategic plan and aligning it with the formation of our next capital campaign. I felt like I needed a year to get engaged on and off campus. I needed a year to kind of look at our balance sheet and to look at what we do before I was really ready for us to launch into a strategic planning mode. But I think, beginning this summer, we'll put those pieces in place to do that. So thrilled to be completing the first campaign, Fortify the Future, early. We do have our annual fund, so Mayor Carlson would love for you to write a check to Drury as well. But to support our student scholarship.
It wouldn't be the first, Jeff.
Well, and thank you. Bless you for that. But we need to think about, Drury's future. What does a liberal arts institution look like in 10 years?
Exactly.
What does that programming look like? What does that engagement look like? We have feasted on beliefs like mentoring and internship and interdisciplinary work and international travel as life-changing. And they likely all still are, but how we accomplish all of those things 5 and 10 years from now, it's worth us sort of working through to figure out how we approach the next handful of years.
So, give me the elevator speech about if things break the way you hope they will, what Drury looks like in 10 years.
Man, that's one of the deliverables from this process is, we need to be in common ground in one voice on what that is. The theme of the inauguration event that we had back in October and sort of moving forward was one Drury, not multiple juries. And we have a grad school. We have a part of our institution that serves adult learners and online learners. We have the traditional day school program where students mostly live on campus. And we don't want those to be 3 juries. We want those to be one Drury. We have branch campuses like at St. Robert and Monette and other places, and we don't want those to be multiple juries. We want it to be one Drury all fitting together. So the quick answer is that's part of this process so that we can all answer that elevator speech of what Drury is going to be like in 10 years.
How do you get tripped up? What's the challenge? What are the challenges?
Well, there's all sorts of forces that we can't control. We can't control the price of construction materials or renovation materials. Hard to control the ability to maintain some of our buildings. We don't know what the different modalities of how one gets a college education will be in 10 years. But to answer your question about what we'll be like, here's what I would say. Drury is always going to be a place where we serve every student that walks into the door, no matter who they are, where they come from, how they identify. It's a personalized education approach. So however we're doing this in 10 years, that will be front and center of our mission. And the second thing is we'll be continuing to make sure that people get that transformative experience. What I was like when I left after 4 years at Drury was I had a whole bucket load of skills that I never thought I was going to have. Now, we need to be constantly vigilant about, taking a look at our curriculum, making sure that we're talking to our partners about what the needs are of our graduates. We need to be constantly tending our garden, if you will, to make sure that everything is flourishing as much as possible. But I would say the thing I would start with to answer your question about what Drury is like in 10 years is we better still be good at a personalized education, because we're not going to win on volume. We have no aspirations of one day in 10 years you're saying, oh, Drury has 15,000 students. That's not who we are. That's not Drury. So we've got to continue to be Drury and allow Drury to grow as technology and times change, but still fall back on those bedrock principles.
I've been an observer of local businesses that have done quite well. For example, I've written an article or two about O'Reilly Automotive, the Hershen family. I've talked about those, and other large companies have been hugely successful. And one of the big things they always seem to talk about is their own particular corporate culture and essentially buy-in. O'Reilly, for example, before they hire somebody, they will send them for training and say, this is how you serve your customers, that kind of thing. And it seemed to me that would be an essential element of accomplishing your mission.
I think for us, what always sits in the middle of everything and everything else orbits around this is student success. A culture of student success. How do we help our students achieve what they come to us expecting to achieve? And that becomes the North Star, serving our students. Now, not everything a student wishes we did necessarily is right for them. I note today that I read in the paper that it's National Oreo Day. Okay. And I can remember my 3 and 4-year-olds wanting to have Oreos every day after every meal. Might have made a lot of sense to them, probably didn't make sense to us as parents, but we have to be in tune to those students in order to be able to put them in the middle of all of this so that we can serve them one at a time.
I want to ask you a question that's not directly related to Drury, but you're talking about producing 21st century well-educated, engaged citizens. How do we keep those people from moving away to another city? How do we keep those stars here?
Is where if a student leaves to get advanced training elsewhere, the chance of getting them back is not as good. We have a PA program. We would love as many of those PAs to stay and practice in the Ozarks as possible. We've launched an engineering program, electrical and mechanical engineering, off to a great start. Those students are making things in their first year. We'd love for them to stay here. So part of this goes back to that partnering, is we have to have a way to partner with the public schools to move people into one of our educational institutions. We have to have corporate and institutional partners who can find ways to help keep them in school, to give them internships, part-time jobs, a little bit of a reason to want to stay here, and then we've got to pull them through on the other end with a dynamic educational experience, and so that their affinity for this area only grows. Not, I've got to go somewhere else to be able to do what I want to do, and maybe I'll come back one day, but everything I've ever needed is right here in Springfield. Now, I won't venture too far into these other subjects, but the city itself is wrestling with all sorts of ways in the Ozarks to make sure that we're continuing to bring in new economic development, to make sure that we're bringing in housing options, to make sure that we're helping to solve childcare issues in this town. So it's not a Drury issue or a higher ed issue. It's how do we all work together in a town like this so that the best and the brightest see their future here, and they can realize it with 3 or 4 steps along the way that make them want to stay.
Jeff, I'm excited just hearing you talk about Drury. I lived just north of there for 34 years, so I have quite a bit of insight into it, but you leave me with a lot of warm fuzzies. But before we conclude, is there anything else you'd like to say about Drury I haven't asked you?
You know, I think what I would say is that we're back, we're open for business. If there's a way in which we can partner with any entity in town, if someone needs some expertise that we have, we are all ears. We don't presume to have all of the best ideas, but if there's an idea coming from the community, hey, could Drury help us with this? Do you have a faculty expert that could help me with that? What would it be like to have a couple of student interns from Drury come and work with us? And we've done a fair bit of that in the corporate and the nonprofit world. It's always been a part of Drury, but we've done more of it. But I think the thing I would leave you with is that if you want to know more about who we are, all you got to do is reach out to me. We got a whole bunch of people who are happy to have that conversation. You know, earlier we talked about the idea that a lot of people in the Ozarks probably thought, well, I've heard about Drury, but I'm sure I can't afford it.
Right.
A Drury education is really very little difference in the cost between a public university education. And Drury students tend to graduate with less debt, very easy to get connected to a part-time job or a work study or to get those kinds of internships. So if people walk around thinking one thing about Drury and they're not sure if that's true, just reach out to me. I'd be happy to have a cup of coffee or another beverage and to talk about how we might partner with them as well.
You know, there's a saying I find myself repeating to myself a lot. Price is what you pay, value is what you get. And so you need to look at it a little close.
I agree. You know, I think, you know, when we think of universities, we sometimes think of what will it do for me today? Well, a lot, and students have lots of choices of places that will. But what will that degree do for me over the next 4 years, over the next 40 years? How is it going to prepare me for what's next?
Exactly. Dr. Frederick, thank you for being my guest today on In Our Town.
Thank you, Tom.